Hello everybody, this video is to go with the third lesson in the Microsoft Teams folder on London, and that question is looking at the UK and specifically at where people live in the UK. So the different things we're going to be looking at doing is describing where people in the UK live using a map. We're going to be looking at some of the reasons behind that distribution of population and why people live where they do, and also we're going to take that a little bit further and look at how that population distribution might change in the future and what some of the reasons could be for those changes. Now we've just got a little bit of vocabulary to make sure we understand before we get started. So the first word I want us to have a look at is distribution. Now this word is something that throws a lot of you when we do exam questions, but it simply means how something is spread out over an area. So when you're writing about distribution, you're going to be talking about place names using compass directions. The second thing we're going to be talking about a lot this lesson is the Industrial Revolution. Now the Industrial Revolution is a change that happened in the UK from the sort of mid-1700s to the late 1800s, and that change was how people made money and how they worked. So before then, the vast majority of people were involved in the farming industry and agriculture, worked on the land. But during the Industrial Revolution, there was a great change towards manufacturing and factories, and with that was a big move of people from the rural areas into the towns and cities. Now, if you have a look at slide 3 on the PowerPoint, you can see you have got this graph showing the UK population size and how it has changed over time from 1851 to a projection of what we think it will be in 2039. And we can see that for the majority of the time, the UK population has been increasing. It's not always constant. Sometimes it increases a little bit more quickly. Sometimes it increases a bit more slowly, where the graph is a bit flatter. And we have one point here in the 1970s where the population actually goes down a bit. But we can see that our overall trend is that over this time, the population of the UK was increasing. Now, if we look at slide 4, we can see that not only was the population increasing, but the way that population was working and making money was changing very rapidly. By 1914, England was the centre of a great trading empire. So the British Empire at its height covered about a fifth of the globe, so lots and lots of goods from all around the world were coming into the UK and then being redistributed to other places. So our ports were incredibly important, and we were making a huge amount of money out of all this trading. So along with that trading came the move towards industrialisation. People leaving the rural areas, moving into the urban areas, industry and factory work. And one of the most important things that powered this was the coal industry. Coal was being used to make energy to power those factories. Also coal being used to power the ships, to power the railways. So goods could be transported a lot more quickly. We weren't reliant on sort of water and wind for power. We could burn coal to make steam. Also the development of the railways, so goods could be transported far more quickly, as could information with the introduction of the telegraph system. So rather than messages moving from place to place having to be taken by hand, information could be telegraphed in a matter of moments. So the UK became this huge central hub of work and industry, and one of the most important things about coal was it could produce huge amounts of energy, so we could make a lot of goods and then sell those on. Along with this huge change in industry, we had this big growth in the population, and that was fueled by a decrease in death rates. So better understanding of medicine, better understanding of why people got sick and where germs came from meant that the death rate was going down, and therefore the population was able to increase. So in 1750, only about 15% of our population was living in towns and cities, but due to the Industrial Revolution and that move of people working in factories, by 1900 that had grown to 85%. Now London was by far the biggest city with 4.5 million inhabitants. And that was driven by the Docklands and by all the factories that grew up in that area because of the huge amount of money and commerce and goods that was moving through London at that time. But we also had some big cities developing in the north of the United Kingdom. So we've got Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham in the Midlands. And one of the main things that people were working in these areas were the coal fields. As I said earlier, coal was absolutely vital to power the Industrial Revolution, to power all those factories. So for a lot of people who have been working on the land, moving north and working down those coal mines was work that was available to them and work that they were able to do. Now, if we look at slide 5, we can see the distribution of the UK. And over here on the side in these boxes, we have the tasks that I would like you to complete. So first of all, we're locating the UK's major cities and we are describing the distribution of the population. So if we look at our map, we can see we've got these colours, we've got the key here. So the paler colours mean that there are few people living in the area, and the darker colours mean that it's a very dense population. That means there's lots of people living there. So where there's few people, we call this a sparse population, and where there's many people, we call it a dense population. Okay, so if we look at our map, we can name some of these cities. So we've got London here in the southeast, our capital. As we move further north up the map, here we have got Birmingham, we've got Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds. As we move further again onto the northeast coast, we've got Hull and we have got Newcastle. Moving up into Scotland, here we have got Edinburgh and Glasgow. We have got Northern Ireland over here, okay, and here we have got Belfast. We've got Dublin down here in the Republic of Ireland, and down here we have got sort of South Wales, the Cardiff area, okay. But if we're going to describe distribution, we need to also think, can we see any patterns? Can we use our compass directions? So if we look down here in the southeast of England, we have an area that's very densely populated. It's where our capital city is. And so obviously a lot of people are attracted there to do for work. And we have this slightly darker band heading through the Midlands and up into the northwest of England, where we can see we have got slightly higher level of population than other places in the country. And we're taking in these very densely populated areas such as Birmingham and Manchester. If we look over to the east of the country, that's in the north and in the Midlands, we can see we've got slightly paler colour. So we've got fewer people living there, but something that really stands out is Newcastle and Hull. So Newcastle and Hull stand out, especially in the northeast here, as being far more densely populated than the rest of that area. And if we look at Wales, just here, we can see that South Wales is a lot more densely populated, especially than Central Wales. We've got slight sort of density of population here in North Wales. If we move towards Scotland, this area here is known as the Belt, okay, and that is an area of high population density that spreads between Glasgow and Edinburgh, but certainly other areas in Scotland have a far less dense population spread, and especially if we move up towards northwest Scotland, we've got very few people living there. So hopefully there we can see a little bit of a pattern, that we have got dense population here in the southeast. We're going up in a band up to sort of northwest England. The northeast area here and the northern area, quite sparse populations apart from sort of Newcastle and Hull. And way up in the northwest of Scotland, we've got very little population, and we've got this more densely populated area here known as the Belt. Okay? So we need to look at a few reasons for this population development, and we need to try to relate it to the Industrial Revolution. So let's just have a look at a few examples here. So Manchester, this is a place during the Industrial Revolution that was really known for the textile industry. So if you had been working on the land, the cotton mills were a place that you could go and work. It was difficult work. It was long hours. People got sick, got sort of lung diseases from breathing in all the cotton fibres. But if you'd been working on the land, maybe you couldn't read and write, you didn't have access to an education, then working in the cotton mills was something that you could do. It was also work that was something that children could do. So if you were a child from a poor background, maybe living in the poorhouse, maybe living in an orphanage, you could go and work in the cotton mills. And the reason for that is that children were small enough that they could crawl around under the machinery and they could pick up bits of cotton that would have otherwise gone to waste. Again, this was dangerous work because sometimes the children would get caught in the machinery, sort of really horrific injuries. If we move over to the east coast, in the northeast here, we've got Newcastle. Newcastle was really well known in the Industrial Revolution for its heavy industry. So building ships, building steam trains. Okay, so that sort of physical labour caused a huge influx of people into the Newcastle area to work in those docklands. And the same on the opposite side of the country in the west in Liverpool, big docklands there as well. If we go further south into sort of the Yorkshire area and the Midlands, the Birmingham area, a lot of people moving to these areas for the steelworks and the coal mines. As I've already said a couple of times, the coal mines were really, really important. They fueled the Industrial Revolution. And again, that basic labour was stuff that people could do if they'd previously worked out in the field and didn't have a good standard of education. The same in South Wales as well. There were lots of coal fields in the valleys of South Wales, and the steel industry was really big in that area too. We've got London here. Okay, that had huge growth in the Industrial Revolution. It was the capital of a large empire. You had the River Thames, we had the Docklands, so all those boats coming in, all that trading. So all that buying and selling, along with all the factories, made London incredibly wealthy. Lots of deals going on there. And that's something we still see today with London, which is status as one of the financial centres of the globe. Okay, so still lots of business going on, but now it's banking rather than docklands. Up in Scotland, we also had a heavy industry, especially in Glasgow with the cotton mills again became very well known, just as Manchester was for people working in the textile industry, also shipbuilding as well. So all these areas sort of really well known for heavy industry, things like coal mining, shipbuilding, cotton mills, and that drawing people in from the rural areas, giving us these pockets of really dense population. Now, the last thing that we need to look at, if we just go back to the previous slide for a moment, slide 5, looking at how migration and counter-urbanisation may change what our country looks like in the future. Now, we have talked about counter-urbanisation before, but if you can't remember what that is, it's the opposite of urbanisation. So urbanisation is the people moving from the rural to the urban. Counter-urbanisation is going the other way, so people moving from the urban areas, from the towns and cities into the countryside. So that proportion of people living in the towns and cities will actually go down. Now, there's different reasons why that might happen, and if you have a look at slide 7, it's got one of the reasons here, and that reason is retirement. As we have already mentioned, the UK has got an ageing population, a lot of people reaching retirement age, and when you have retired, you are free to go and live anywhere you want to in the country. You're not tied to the city anymore, you're not tied to your place of work, and lots of people will choose to move out into the countryside, maybe sell their house in the city, and with the money they make from that, they can buy a bigger house in the countryside, maybe with a garden, maybe with a driveway. Okay, so it's a nice different pace of life. What also fuels counter-urbanisation is technology. So for a lot of people that have got office-based jobs, there is now the option to maybe work from home 1 or 2 days a week because we've got the internet, we've got video conferencing. So people don't have to travel into the city all the time to work. So that might mean that people choose to move themselves and their families out into the countryside as well. Well, why would they do that? There's all sorts of different reasons for it. The cities can be seen as crowded, expensive, having poor air quality, having crime, having not so good schools to send their kids to. So the countryside, the rural area can look very attractive. You can get a bigger house for your money. You can make sure you've got a garden, you've got a different pace of life. There's lower crime rates. There's like a nice local school to go to. And with our high levels of technology, with the internet, with our good transport networks, people are able to do that. Something else that has really shaped our country for a really long time and our population is migration. Now, obviously, being part of the EU, we had a huge amount of migration coming from Europe, especially Eastern Europe. And also we've had people moving here from Commonwealth countries as well. So people particularly attracted here for work, especially in the healthcare or elderly care areas. So that is something we are going to see change with Brexit. There is no doubt that migration will continue to be a really important part of our population and our economy, because having an ageing population, there is a concern that we're not going to have enough workers to support that ageing population. But obviously the way migration works in our country is set to change. So because that's changing so much, I would be surprised if you've got any exam questions in the next couple of years about migration from Europe. So it's nothing to worry about too much, but just do be aware that our population is greatly changed and shaped by migration, and that will still continue to be the case. Okay, so that's about everything from this lesson. If there's anything that you haven't understood or you need extra help with, then please do email your geography teacher and we'll do everything that we can to help you. Okay, bye.